It's important to use the scope of the market to prioritize probable patterns, and you'll hear me talk about this a lot, especially in the follow-up service. As we're analyzing the live market, I will often refer to the scope of the market to give us to prioritize our preferred view over our alternate view. Okay, when pattern trading, there's always an alternate possibility. So when the choice between two patterns is not readily apparent, we can look at the scope of the market to determine the highest probability. We want to look at other major currencies and their patterns against the same currency to try to shed some light on what is happening. So, for example, we have an ABC pattern that's playing out on the euro dollar. Okay, but it's not readily apparent if we're going to continue with that particular pattern or if we're going to return to a larger trend. Well, what we can do is we can look at other majors against the US dollar and their patterns. Let's say we look at the British pound and we see the British pound is in a flat corrected pattern. And we look at the dollar Swiss even, and maybe that's in a triangle. Okay, so looking at the scope of the market, we see two corrective patterns on these other pairs. We see a flat on the British pound. We see a triangle on the Swissy. That's going to give us the probability that our zigzag is going to be a completed correction, and we're going to return to the trend. Okay, so that's where we would put our probability. We'll look at highly correlated pairs and their current patterns. In the case of the US dollar, we can look at the dollar index to get a better feel for the overall strength or weakness of the greenback. For commodity currencies, we'll analyze the commodity futures to give us clues. You know, if we're looking at the Australian dollar and we're not quite sure about the pattern that's developing there, maybe we look at the gold market and see if there's something clear in gold that can give us an idea of what we can look for with the Australian dollar as a whole. Okay, if we're looking at the Canadian dollar, and we see a pattern that's not necessarily clear, we can look at the oil market and see if we see something more clear developing in the oil market that can help us trade the Canadian dollar. We know the equities market can also be a good sentiment gauge about the overall risk appetite in the market. Okay, so use the scope of the market. Using the scope of the market will give us a better picture of what is happening with the whole of the market, and that allows us to prioritize our price patterns, giving us a higher probability.